in its entirety, so sit back, relax, breathe deeply, and hear the words of the psalmist. Are we recording, Nick? Okay. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. If only you, God, would slay the wicked. Away from me, you who are bloodthirsty. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Word of God, word of life. Thanks be to God. Search me and know me. That's the prayer of the psalmist. And I think this is such a terrifying prayer. Right? I spend a good amount of my mental and emotional energy trying to hide the depths of myself, of putting up walls and safeguards so that others will only see what I want them to see. I only want the world to see me as the one who has herself together, the one who is competent and confident. It takes a lot for me to be vulnerable and to allow anyone to see my inmost thoughts, much less be really open to God seeing them. Because on my worst days, I like to convince myself that if I keep my outward being perfect, if I can somehow hold it all together, then even God will be convinced that I am worthy of love. If I can keep God on that outside, I can maybe control that enough to affect my own salvation. This is the lie I tell myself. So when I hear the psalmist pray for God to search and know them, I think, ooh, nope, that's asking for trouble. I don't want that. But then the prayer of the psalmist is both yes, an asking for God to come and search, but it's also an acknowledgement that God has already done it. Like it or not, God has already searched and known our whole self. The good, the bad, the public persona we put on, and the secrets we keep even from ourselves. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? And yeah, I think for me, at least in various times throughout my life, that word flee is right on the mark. Oh God, you know how messed up it is in here and in here. I'm just going to go over here now because obviously we're done here, right? All right, I'm just going to go away. And it might be counterintuitive, but it is sometimes easier to flee when we think God is getting just a little bit too close. When we start to feel just a little too vulnerable, even spiritually, that thing deep in our brain, and Autumn probably knows this better than I do, right? That fight or flight instinct kicks in. We want to protect ourselves from harm, so we run away or build up walls because it can be frightening to be known that fully, that deeply. And it can be guilt-inducing when we are known fully and yet still find ourselves loved. It would maybe be easier if the reaction to being deeply known was, wow, yeah, you're really messed up. I don't want any part of that. Right? Because then we can just kind of keep doing what we're doing anyway, right? If they're all going to check out anyway, I can just keep doing myself. But when the reaction is, wow, you're pretty messed up, and I still love you, we know change is going to happen. And it's not that we then do the hard work of change all by ourselves, but when that kind of deep love is present, change simply happens. And even if it's the kind of change that is good and productive and needed, we as humans 9 times out of 10 would rather not do the change. But God's love is the kind that will come into the cracks of our walls and our games. God's love is the kind that chases after us when we flee and that loves us even when we don't believe we are lovable. God's love is the kind that changes us simply from being well-loved. And I think that is part of the reason why this community has committed to having mental health as a part of the way in which we do ministry in this world. Because we know that, sure, as a worshiping community, we could say this reality: you are loved, you are loved, you are loved, you are loved, till we're blue in the face. We can put it on flags. Don't you love this flag? It is just a flag. We can just print it on flags. We can put it in our mission statement. But we know that for some of us, or really all of us, at certain points, we go fleeing from that message. And providing mental health care in the form of counseling especially creates a space where instead of fleeing that message, we're invited to sit and wrestle with it and all the ways we want to reject it until finally maybe then it can sink in. Know my heart. Know my anxious thoughts. The gift of mental health care is the space where we can begin to separate the messages of our hearts from the messages of our anxious thoughts, from the messages really of God. And I can attest firsthand to Autumn being an embodiment of that gift. Her time here has been characterized by so much care, so much love, so much truth-telling, so much reframing specifically of my own anxious thoughts. She's the one I would call to be like, oh my gosh, Adam, I'm just spiraling right now. And she'd be like, okay, but what if you thought of it this way? And I was like, oh, that seems entirely too simple. Right? She has helped reframe my anxious thoughts into messages of God's love and challenge. And I know many of you who have gone to her consistently, or even if you just have experienced her once, have found her to be a safe place in which to grapple with the difference between what we think to be true and what God says to be true, and then how to reconcile with our belovedness. This is why we are committed to continuing to provide this specific kind of care and space. We hope in the coming weeks the Spirit will bring the right person to help us continue ministry in this specific way, even as we wish Autumn will as she creates that space in other places. But we also know that for many people, these sorts of spaces are too few and far between. So we strive to create this space beyond just those who receive specifically counseling in this community. We strive to be a whole body of people who can help others understand the depths of God's love. We seek to be a compassionate place where someone can say how terrifying that unconditional love is. We work to be a safe place where people can stop fleeing, stop fighting, stop building up all their walls and defenses, and be vulnerable and open to receiving that deep love. But that is hard work. I wish love made everything easy and rosy and like warm and fuzzy. Like I wish that is really what all that it took. But it doesn't. However, I believe love does move us from fleeing toward action that is actually productive. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Again, you probably know the word fear is a poor translation in our modern language for what the Hebrew really means, which is more like awe. But it's like even worse in English to say I'm awfully made. Like, that's don't say that. But this sense of being deeply loved by God leads us not to reject ourselves or to flee, but to breathe, to stand, to rejoice in how amazing we are as God's creation. This is another part of the beautiful prayer, that beauty happens when we can give ourselves the space and permission to receive God's love. Yet even once we get there, to loving ourselves as God has loved us, of being able to admit that yes, we are worthy and wonderfully made, that love can't just sit there. That love then compels us into loving others. And I will admit there's this part of the psalmist's prayer that fails on this point, right? There's always that part of Psalms where they all of a sudden they turn into like, please slay the wicked, right? And you're like, okay. I mean, I get the impulse and like, do I pray that prayer a lot? But also, I would like to think that this is still a prayer born out of love. A love of God and God's world that wants to reflect the reality of that love. That's what justice seeking is all about, right? Love lived in systems, love lived in public. About loving the world as it is, yes, but wanting it to be closer to God's intention. Love keeps us from fleeing the problems of the world and instead insists on working towards systems and actions that proclaim that all God's children are loved and are wonderfully made. Lead me in the way of everlasting. It is only this cycle of love and action, of safe space to reflect and moving toward justice, that we join in God's everlasting love for the world. I will say that liturgically, today is Trinity Sunday, Holy Trinity Sunday. So if you were to be at like some other higher church place, the preacher would be turning themselves into knots, trying to say something both compelling about the Trinity and also not heretical. I don't think such a statement exists, actually. Like, I think our language is imperfect, and so it's all going to be heresy to someone at some point. However, I think actually this prayer taps into the mystery of the Trinity. That God created us, that God sees us and is with us in the depths, and that God still loves us and walks with us as we try to make this world a place where we can believe in that belovedness. We worship a God of love and movement and presence, and we enter into prayer with the psalmist for that God to know us more deeply and for us to know them more deeply too. So may the 1 in 3 the mystery, the divine who created you as a wonder. Give you the strength and the space to know that love, to believe it deep within you, and to show it to a world who needs it too. Amen.